Hey friends, it's John. You're in the JRB Tree Climbing channel. Also the name of my website, my Patreon, my Facebook group, my Facebook page. Let's talk about Blake's Hitch, and we're going to go deep. You don't need to come to the JRB Tree Climbing channel to learn about a knot that anyone can teach you how to tie. We're going to go deep, and I'm going to tell you everything I know about the Blake's Hitch, how to tie it, all about it, its variants, perhaps some you haven't seen before, its features, its limitations, misconceptions, and usages. Blake's Hitch is the popular name for the knot discovered by Heinz Prohaska in 1981, published in an Austrian guidebook. He introduced it again in 1990. But the popular name Blake's Hitch was by Jason Blake in a letter to tree climbing magazine Arbor Age in 1994. And herein we've got a lesson. Different folks can discover the same knot. It's no crime that great minds think alike, and two folks may have come up with the same knot. But the credit typically would go to the original inventor, and in this case, that didn't happen. So I'm going to give credit to Heinz Prohaska, but go by the popular name of Blake's Hitch. So, some features of the friction hitch. So first of all, it's not very complex to tie, relatively speaking. It's a friction hitch, obviously. It's tied with a single strand. So you've seen a lot of friction hitches, a lot of my favorites, such as the Michoacán and others that require two strands or an eye-to-eye to tie them. Well, the Blake's Hitch is tied with a single strand of similar or close diameter. It holds really well. It moves really well. It can be tended like that, and it can be broken under load, and I mean under reasonable load. And it's very popular for use in doubled rope systems, moving rope systems, and I've got one right here. So this is a self-tending Blake's Hitch system. There's a Blake's Hitch here and there's a Blake's Hitch here. The climber would be attached here. The climber would pull something more than half of their body weight here, and the system goes up. This Blake's Hitch holds half the climber's weight, and this Blake's Hitch tends the first one. If this hitch wasn't here, well, then the system would just bounce up and down. So this is what we call an automatically tending double Blake's Hitch system. But off here on the left, I've got a lot of other variants that I'm going to take you through and show you how to tie them. Okay, so let's tie a Blake's Hitch. First, I am working with 8mm rope and tying onto 8mm rope. Before I even think about tying a Blake's Hitch, I will take my rope and pinch it, and I'll just check what kind of bend radius I get, because I need this to wrap around a rope of the same diameter. And so if this rope is too stiff and I'm unable to pinch it past that, I know it's not going to perform very well. I might not be able to form a Blake's Hitch, but with just gentle finger strength, I see that I can bend it down to its own radius. I know I'm going to be successful. So I've got a working end here off onto my right. I'm right-handed, so I generally prefer to operate in the right-handed or Z chirality. I will place the working rope over the standing rope in this fashion, and I will make 4 upward coils. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. This is the point it entered. This is the point it's exiting. I've made 4 complete turns. I take the working end and I drape it down in front of and across the standing part. Go behind the host rope, and I go up, under, and through these first 2 wraps. You'll see arborists who are using thicker ropes and they'll leave their finger in there as a spacer. I find that it's pretty easy to just uncoil that. And that's the beginnings of an unfinished Blake's. Let's give this a spin, give that a tug, and I now have a Blake's Hitch, and I can test it by tugging here. I see it holds, and I'm ready to set my stopper knot. Blake's Hitch is not an inherently or intrinsically safe or secure knot. What that means is it needs a stopper. Anything that needs a stopper is not considered to be intrinsically secure. And you can choose your favorite stopper knot. I'll just simply form a double overhand. I'm not going to make that real tight because we're going to take this right off and show you some variations. So that's a Blake's hitch, and I can test that with a load. I'm now going to tie it in the left-handed or S chirality, and the reason I'm doing so is there are applications, and I'll show you one in a moment, where I prefer to tie it the other way. It might have to do with the orientation of the system that you're creating and where you want to have your hands. So it's just really important that you can tie this any way imaginable. So this will be the same knot, just in the opposite chirality. I'm starting from the right instead of the left. Round 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. Drape it down across the front, around the back of the rope, and up through 2 strands. Give that a tug and put my stopper knot here. Now, why might I want to tie one left-handed? Let's pan out and take a look. So this system here on the tree, this moving rope system, is exactly how I tie my Blake's Hitch moving rope system. I am right-handed, and I just developed a habit over the years where I like to pull on the right side. So this is the side I like to pull on. Well, if I want to pull on the right side, I wanted a Blake's Hitch like this one that started here, it shot out its end here, and it was used to form this. So let's just back this tending knot off and tie one more Blake's Hitch here so you understand. This Blake's Hitch here is identical to this one you just watched me tie. It's identical. Just has a longer tail, and that tail is affixed to the other part of the moving rope system. 1, 2, 3, 4, down across the front, up through 2 strands, and hopefully I have enough for a stopper knot. Just a single overhand, and I have a moving rope system which automatically tends. Now, even though this hitch was devised and introduced and became popular in the last 3 decades, and many arborists have spent a career on this system, and I have great respect for it, I will say I don't climb this way, and I don't recommend that you climb this way. There are better ways to climb. But I do think it's imperative that you understand how to construct this system because it is so minimal in its nature. My analogy is this. I climb trees every day, and I never use this system, or very, very rarely. I also drive a car almost every day. Something I'm capable of doing is changing a tire. That's a skill I have when I drive a car. I have that responsibility because you just never know when you might need to. Well, that's kind of how I treat a Blake's Hitch moving rope system. If you found yourself in a situation where all you had was a rope and a carabiner, you can still create a moving rope system and climb up in a tree. But under all normal circumstances, I am prepared. I'm prepared to climb a tree. And so besides the rope, I've got what I need to climb it more efficiently, such as, obviously your saddle, but here I've got a Longhorn Agile Hitch, right? You've seen me climb on a Longhorn Agile. This greatly outperforms the Blake's Hitch. And the truest test of a friction hitch isn't if you can climb in a moving rope system. The truest test is if you can climb in a single rope, stationary rope system. And I'm capable of doing that on the Longhorn Agile. So again, all due respect to anyone who's using it and loves it and has made a career out of it, that's great, but its use in the field is declining as stationary rope systems and their advantages are being recognized by climbers across the world. So here on this black rope and this camouflage cord, I've got a different variant. This variant is what we call the 4-2 Blakes Hitch. Why do we call it the 4-2? We call it the 4-2 because I used 4 wraps and I went up through 2. 4-2 Blakes, standard Blakes Hitch. This is what they call the 5-3 Blakes Hitch. Darker colors, I understand, but what we've got here is 5 wraps, and this goes up through 3. Now, why was that necessary? Well, when we're working with stiffer ropes, so when we do that test and we check the bend radius of our rope, when I squeeze this, well, it's much stiffer. I know I'm going to have a harder time, and in fact, I'll save you the trouble. I did test it, and I really had an impossible time to get a 4-2 Blakes to hold here, but a 5-3 with a little bit of elbow grease held. Let's do it real quick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Down across the front. And I'm going to go up through 3 strands here. 1, 2, 3. Now setting it is just a little bit more work. I've got to really kind of twist on this, try to get those coils. All right, I've kind of got that to hold, and then I tie my stopper knot here, and I'll just abbreviate it as such. One of the misconceptions about Blake's Hitch is that the rope that we are using to tie it is the same as the host. Here I've got 7mm cord on 8mm rope, and I find that works great. And look at that great bend radius. Anytime we're working just a millimeter smaller, I find that you'll get great performance. So don't be afraid of mixing and matching and using something that's a little bit smaller and more flexible. You might find that the performance warrants it. Now, I will say in terms of limitations that when a Blake's Hitch is put under a heavy load, or if it's used as a rappel device. So over here on this system, folks will use their Blake's Hitch as their rappel device. It can get kind of jammed up, and so be aware of that. I always advise using a munter friction hitch. Even here on a moving rope system, I'll still put a munter underneath this and turn my Blake's Hitch into a backup on rappel. And if you try to SRT climb on a Blake's Hitch, you'll find that the exertion of your entire body weight here can get that kind of jammed up and hard to move and harder to break. And so I don't recommend it for those kinds of really heavy applications. It's great for up to half your weight or any of these other utility applications. Here in my hand I have a tiny little machine that I built, and it has been on my hunting rifle for probably a decade. It's a sling for my rifle that I use to clip onto my saddle. This little carabiner clips onto basically my bridge carabiner, and here is a length of paracord, and what's further down on that paracord? Well, there's a Blake's Hitch. And that Blake's Hitch is really just a loop, and it's an adjustable loop. I've created an adjustable loop out of paracord. And what do I do with that? Well, I create a girth hitch here, and that goes around the pistol grip of my hunting rifle, right here where my fingers are. My pistol grip is there, and I can set this length such that with this clipped on my bridge, my pistol grip is right at the perfect place where I reach my hand down at my right side, and my rifle is in my hand and on my shoulder when I need it. So there's a real practical usage for creating an adjustable loop with a Blake's Hitch on paracord. We can use this in all kinds of situations. But what variant of the Blake's Hitch should we use? Let's take a look. So what I've noticed is that when tying Blake's Hitch on more slippery materials, or in a situation where we're not climbing, so we don't need this thing to be super great performance. We want it to basically stay in place. It'll move when I need it to move. I prefer to use the 5-2 variant. That's what I've got here. I've got a 5-2 variant of the Blakes. So let's tie that. Let's tie that real quick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that will be a 5 wrap variant. And now I'm going to go up through 2. But this can be kind of tough. It can be kind of like threading a needle. It's a little bit tough to do. And as you saw when I untied it, my stopper goes here. When I untied it, it's a little bit of a hassle. So let's pause for a second. Let's take a look at what I've got going on next door here. This is my addition to the Blake's Hitch family. And if you watched my first video on an adjustable bridge, I used this. It was a slipped Blake's Hitch. What's a slipped Blake's Hitch? Well, watch how easy it is to remove this Blake's Hitch. It's tied and set and dressed. It looks a little different, right? But I can simply pull on it and get it off. So let's see how we tie that. I'll make this one a 4-2. 1, 2, 3, 4 around the front. Now instead of pushing this line up through, I'm going to push a bite up through. I'm going to put 2 strands up through. Now believe it or not, this really doesn't seem to affect the integrity of the Blake's Hitch. We can dress it the same way. We can test it and set it. Make sure it's holding. But then to ensure that it will not collapse, what I do is I take the end and put it through this loop and then cinch down on that loop. See what I've done there? I've created a Blake's Hitch, and there's no feasible, realistic way that this can pop through. There's enough. I mean, I've tested this enough times. I've climbed on it enough. It's got slightly less hold than if I just put a single up through here, but it does hold. And of course, it's easy to pop out, and I could transform it into a 5-2 really quickly. So that's 5 down. So this is my favorite Blake's. If I am, especially for anything I'm going to untie, which is typically something I do, right? I don't leave my Blake's hitches tied forever, except maybe that sling application. And even if I did, it holds great. It's very sleek and compact, and you don't have to worry about that stopper knot. And you have the option of creating one here on the end in addition to what you have. So that is JRB's Slipped Blakes Hitch, and here it is as a 5-2. And I'm going to take this 5-2 and change it over. So there it is. Holds, and I'll take this and put it through. Five, 2 slipped Blakes. Now here's some contraptions. What do I have here? I've got a Blake's hitch, a 4-2 Blakes, and a 4-2 Blakes. And instead of a stopper knot, I've got a hunter's bend serving as both a stopper knot and as a connector. These were formed with just a single piece of cordage. You see what I have here? I've got 2 Blake's hitches connected together. Well, what good is that? Well, if I had to execute an SRT climb on nothing but a Blake's hitch, if you try to climb on this, well, you're not going to get the greatest performance. But if you can distribute your weight between 2 Blake's hitches, between any 2 friction hitches, you're going to get better performance. Refer to my video on the double Michicon. That's the same principle. This I came up with before the double Mich, and it's not a great climbing system, but if I had to climb with nothing but a Blake's, this would be my means for doing so. Let's talk about a misconception with Blake's Hitch. One of the misconceptions is that we always tie it with the same diameter rope. Well, here I've really violated that. I'm using 3mm paracord on 8mm rope. And look, it's just a 4-2 Blake's, but it holds. It holds. This is the slipped variant, but it holds. And the nice thing about the slipped variant is you can still get this tending operation. If I were to have tied this without the slipped variant, let's transform it, you won't get that same tending. So that's an advantage of the slipped version. So that's the standard 4-2 Blake's. Give that some pull. Now, I'm not saying I can't, but, well, no, I can't. It won't auto-tend with this. So the lesson here is that as we reduce the diameter of the cord or rope with which we are forming the Blake's, as it becomes smaller relative to the host rope, our ability to tend it using the working end diminishes, but the slipped version allows us to do that. Let's show you another contraption here. What is this? Well, this is a Blake's Hitch variant, but this is formed with a loop. Let's take it apart. So I've got a loop of 6mm rope. It's closed with simply an overhand bend. Sure, we could have used something more secure. And let's form a Blake's Hitch. And you know, this bend could have been here already or could be put on the end. But let's go around once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, down. Now, I've found that the performance is slightly better if I go up through just 2 strands rather than 4. To truly mirror the original Blake's, I would go up through half of the overall number of strands. I find the performance to be a little better. So you do have a usable friction hitch here, but I don't find its performance to be great. I really don't like climbing on it. I have climbed on it and I can't recommend it, but I would consider this to be a doubled version of a Blake's Hitch formed with a loop. If you do need to climb on this kind of contraption, you're better off using an Agile Hitch, which is very similar. 1, 2, 3, 4. See my video on the Agile. Right to here, everything is exactly the same. It's just that we go around the back and accept the standing loop through the working loop, and we insert a carabiner as a handle. Again, see my prior video on the Agile Hitch. This hitch greatly outperforms Blake's when working with a loop. I wanted to give you this foundation for Blake's Hitch because it becomes an enabler. Just like I showed you the sling on my rifle, it allows us to build other simple machines. Here in my hand, and we'll do this in a future video, I've got a device. This is not dissimilar to the device you saw in my adjustable bridge video, but it's a tensioning device. It's formed with a single piece of cord and it's formed with a carabiner. But I can shorten this tensioning device by pulling on a strand, and I can lengthen it by pulling on a strand. Shorten it and lengthen it. Let's get it real short. But when I put a load on it, it holds. I mean, I can climb on that. I don't recommend climbing on it, but I have. It's actually kind of hard to release under load. But when it's not under load, it's relatively easy. So these kind of machines we can build if we master the Blake's Hitch. And that's why we needed this Blake's Hitch masterclass. Thank you very much.